What is high-functioning anxiety?
Part of high-functioning anxiety is that we're so good at masking, but underneath all of that, there's so much more happening. It's ruminating, it's lonely, it's disconnected. We're in a loneliness pandemic.
Anxiety affects millions in the UK, 1 in 6 adults weekly, and mental disorders in teens have doubled since 2017.
There's so many of us that are feeling disconnected from others. If we keep ignoring it, it keeps coming up louder and louder until we get to the point where it's like, I can't ignore this.
Breaking point?
Look for the hope, look for the small moments. The biggest thing I always tell everyone is about self-trust. What we need to do is come back to our own self-trust, our own intuition.
Is there any way to fix anxiety?
Do we need to fix it or do we need to embrace it?
Today, we're diving deep into the complexities of high-functioning anxiety and the silent struggles many face in our fast-paced world. Joining us today is Dr. Lalitaa, a psychologist, yoga teacher, and international speaker, and author of her most recent book, High-Functioning Anxiety. Dr. Lalitaa has dedicated her career to empowering individuals to overcome self-doubt, reclaim balance, and cultivate inner peace. With a unique blend of psychology, mindfulness, she's helping people break free from cycles of burnout and perfectionism. In this episode, we'll explore the hidden costs of overworking, the early signs of burnout, and actionable strategies to restore well-being. Whether you're striving for high performance or simply looking to lead a more intentional life, this conversation is packed with insights to help you thrive. Welcome, Dr. Lalitaa. So you've got your book, High Functioning Anxiety. You know, anxiety is a word that I feel like we hear multiple times on a daily basis. What is high functioning anxiety?
I feel like it's a bit like having or witnessing the swan. So when you see the swan in the water, on the top and on the surface level, you see that the swan's so beautiful, it's so elegant, it's got it together, it's got everything going on for it. But underneath it's sort of paddling along. So what does the paddling mean? The paddling means it's catastrophizing, it's ruminating, it's thinking about the worst case scenario, it's lonely, it's disconnected. Like there's all these things going on underneath, but no one sees that. Everyone sees that this person's got it together. And that's what I feel like high functioning anxiety is that everyone sees us, we've got it together, but underneath there's so much more happening. No one sees that side of us because we're so afraid to show if someone sees this side, what are they going to think of me or how will they witness me now? And it's like, but it's okay to show that.
And I think that's true because if you've got a high-powered job and you're feeling stressed, they might not want to tell the bosses because they could lose the job or get demoted. You know, if you're a parent and you're feeling that stress, you don't want to complain because you feel like you should be lucky, you're blessed, you've got kids and you feel like a failure. You don't want
There's
people...
all these things on there, Abby, like that go on behind the scenes of like, oh, if I say this, what if? If I say this, what if?
Yeah.
And that we live in this fantasy of like, what if? But there's so much more going on underneath all of that what if. Because actually, if you are feeling a little bit sad, if you are feeling like all these different emotions, it's okay. But we have to sit with whatever is coming up for us. Because if we keep ignoring it, it keeps coming up like
and it'll
louder
manifest.
and louder and louder until we get to the point where it's like, I can't ignore this, like this part of me anymore.
Breaking point. Do you think we're in an anxiety pandemic?
I feel we're in a loneliness pandemic. I feel like there's so many of us that are feeling disconnected from others. I feel like there's so many of us.
In what way? Because I don't feel lonely.
That's beautiful that you say that.
You know,
like, say if I've met with you and I'm like, hi, how are you? How's everything? Everything's amazing on my end. But I'm not truly telling you how I really feel.
Yeah.
I feel like then I'm going home after I've spoken to you and I'm not
dealing
truly
with that on your own.
being who I feel like I am, and I'm dealing with that by myself now.
Yeah.
And then I meet with another friend and I'm like, yeah, everything's amazing, everything's okay, da, da, da. And then the next thing happens and I keep doing that with all my friends. No one really sees what's really going on for me. So I might actually be feeling very sad. I might be feeling like I don't really want to be in this space anymore. There's so many things that can be coming up for people, but no one shares that side.
No.
Everyone feels I have to share
The best side of me.
I have to share
because that's quite
everything's okay.
That's quite common with suicide. A lot of the time, people who have taken their own lives,
Yeah.
the people surrounding them are like, I just never knew. He was happy, laughing. She was the funnest person in the room. And, you know, then things like that happen, which is just awful. I think, you know, we should that's why I wanted you on today to, you know, kind of help our listeners.
Yeah.
How do we recognize when anxiety becomes a problem?
I think it's so important that we start noticing in our friends, our family, like what's actually going on behind the mask.
Yeah.
Because part of high functioning anxiety is that we're so good at masking. We're so good at like, yeah, everything's fine, da, da, da. But underneath all of that, there's so much more happening. And if we notice that there's more happening for people, sometimes it's about them building trust up with us.
Yeah.
Building the ability that this person understands what's going on for me. So I want to talk to them. But a lot of the time people are like, they don't understand. They don't get it. And I will just keep it to myself and I'll just get on with it. But we want people to like understand that we are available.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we do that? Because if someone's coming across like they've got it together, everything's amazing, life's amazing. It's like, well, how are you really? Like, let's just take a moment. Like, how are you really? How are things really going on? So we're going
Do you think people speak to each other like that?
No.
Everyone's so busy. Everyone's so...
Like, that's the problem. Everyone's so
It's
busy.
time.
Everyone's like, oh, how are you? Yeah, you're fine.
And they don't listen to the answer.
You're not listening. You're not approaching people to listen. So I'm like, Abby, how are you? How are things going on? How's like this person? How's this person? Tell me more about what's going on. I'm available. Whereas when we're talking to people aren't often available. They're like, yeah, how's everything? Yeah, it's good. Oh, da, 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 da. And we're on to the next thing. But is that really like the reality of what life's about? I feel like we're so consumed by the next thing. We don't consume ourselves by what's like what life's about right now.
I think I say this on every single podcast. Like, lockdown for me was a real eye-opener.
Why?
Because I actually wanted to stay in that state forever.
But why?
Because I just loved having time.
What did time give you?
So much reward. You know, spending time with my kids.
What was so amazing about like giving your kids undivided attention, having time to cook without worrying about the next thing? What was so amazing about that?
I don't know. I just loved it. And you didn't have to be anywhere else. And I probably feel a bit overstretched at the moment. And it is the run up to Christmas and everyone's working doubly hard so they can finish. But I just feel everything's a bit too much. But like, I don't want to complain because 1 million people would swap to be in my position.
But I feel like that's a real issue because what we end up doing then is we disconnect from like where we are at. So you are someone who might be struggling, but you might be feeling, I can't struggle because look at what I have.
Yeah.
I have this. Look at where I am. I am this, I'm this, I'm this. I shouldn't be complaining. But you're a human being. And being a human being, you are struggling. But there's a fear of if I say to anyone that I'm struggling because of this, God forbid, what will they turn around and say? And how will they actually understand what I'm going through? Because I worry about what they might think.
Yeah. But then when you do say it and it's not met with, okay, I'll help you. And it's a bit like, how can you possibly be stressed?
But who says
you live in a huge house. You've got the dream job.
Yeah.
You know, you've got your health, you're young, like, and then you feel like a bit of a fool, you know?
But Abby, isn't life so much more than that?
Yeah.
Life isn't about who you got married to.
No, I know
about.
that.
Yeah.
I think for people looking in.
Yeah. It's quick for people to judge you, be like, oh, you're a footballer's wife, you should be this, you should be this. But that's people's expectations of who you are. But you're a human being behind that. And it's like, how do you show up being this human being rather than falling into the reality of what people think that you should be? Does that make sense? What do you feel like you do? Do you feel like you become what people want you to be versus who you actually are?
No, I don't take any shit. Like everyone around me will know I can literally kick off at the drop of a hat. But I'm a good person. I do feel like responsible for a lot of people.
Are you a people pleaser?
Ish.
In what way?
I want everyone to have the best life.
What about if someone doesn't? How would that impact on you?
Well, it doesn't sit well with me. I need to fix it for them.
Why do you need to fix it?
Because I like to help people. And I always feel bad, like you know, you go, oh, you've got great things. I don't want anyone to have like a shit life.
Yeah. But can you see how you take on that responsibility of like, it's my job now to fix it for this person because I feel like they're not having a good time. But that's our perception of what's happening rather than what actually is happening.
Yeah.
So do we become the people pleaser in so many different parts of life, wanting to like fix it because we don't know how to sit with someone not being okay or someone not having a good time?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. What's going on for you when I say that? I can feel you in deep reflection.
No, I just feel that that's quite an interesting concept. I've never really looked at it in that way before.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are more of a people pleaser than like you've ever thought you are?
I'm always available.
What does that mean?
I'm the go-to for most people I know to fix things.
Can I ask, say if you're not available, how would that make you feel?
Awful.
Why?
I don't know. Just because that's my role. You know?
Would you feel guilty?
Yeah.
So as a psychologist and working on my second book and understanding and exploring a little bit more about like what's going on deeper, for me, it's about you don't know how to sit in guilt. You don't know how to sit in shame. So when someone else comes in and they're feeling something, you're a very highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
You naturally feed in and feel something that someone's feeling. And it's like, I need to fix this.
Yeah, I do.
And if you don't know how to fix it, you're like, I feel dysregulated. Da, 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 da. There's so much more going on within you. And it's like, I need to fix it in order to feel like, I can breathe now.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you feel very dysregulated.
Yes.
And I think it's about understanding how is it that we can help people around us where we feel like things are going on for people. And being a highly sensitive person, how do we put boundaries there?
Yeah.
So we're not always looking to fix it for people because that's a really big responsibility that we're taking on board.
I reckon there's a lot of listeners who'll be listening to this going, you know, that's me. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
What are some basic tools we can apply to our daily life that we can, you know, help break this cycle and combat some of this anxiety?
The biggest thing I always tell everyone is about self-trust. So once upon a time, you learn, I can't trust my own intuition. I don't get it. I need to now look at everyone else and look at, okay, she's looked at me in that way. I need to give more of this. Or they've looked at me like this. I need to do more of this. What we need to do is come back to our own self-trust, our own intuition. And
I think I've got a great gut instinct.
why do you not follow it?
I do.
So what's this anxiety about that comes up for you?
I don't know.
Because there's an anxiety that comes up for you, but you know that this intuition, this strong belief within me tells me what I need to do. But then this anxiety comes out. Do you follow your anxiety or do you follow your intuition?
Yeah, I think the lines do blur with that.
Yeah.
Because so many times my gut has been right and then it's been wrong. But
In what way?
I
Give
have,
me an example.
I have a saying in my house. My brother will tell you it. Like that I'm always right.
Because you are always right.
Yeah. And
Of course.
but then, you know, sometimes when I have like a mad, you know, catastrophizing, you know, if one of the kids has a cold, they're dying and I cannot get out of this at all. Like this fear, horrific. You know, I'll almost create a problem that doesn't exist. I catastrophize, you know, make scenarios up in my head. If they go on that school trip, the bus is going to crash or all going to die.
Yeah.
Ridiculous things.
And you've already thought of like 10 different ways.
Oh yeah, 10 different ways. I'm not a stupid person, and I know that's completely irrational, that thought process, but I can't stop it.
I think that's also about safety and security. So when you're thinking about that, you're so worried of like, have I made a mistake?
Yeah.
Am I a bad person? So your mind starts to catastrophize thinking, am I a bad person? Have I done something wrong? Have I done this? Have I done this? And you start thinking about all the worst case scenarios that can go on. Now, you're a mother to like 4 kids, and you know that you are an amazing mother. You know
Yeah.
that your attention is there and you will do whatever you need to do for these kids. But your mind will start taking you, what if, what if, what if? And you have to be so mindful of like, where is your mind taking you? Because this catastrophizing of like, what if, you can then start thinking the worst case scenario. What if something happens on the bus? What if this happens? Now, when you're starting thinking of that, your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So your mind now is like looking and feeling into, I've lost my child. I've lost my child because the bus has crashed and this has happened, and this has happened. And you've thought of like the worst case scenario. So that's where your mind has gone. Whereas that's not what's gone on. But your mind has gone there. So you're now feeling very anxious and very worried because your mind's like, oh my God. So
is it just as simple as that? Is it just as simple as saying to yourself, I'm catastrophizing? Is that what we, the advice that you would?
I think we think it's really simple. It's not as simple as that.
Yeah.
Because when you're in that mindset of like catastrophizing, you've already thought of the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So it's bringing yourself back into reality.
And how do you do that?
So again, talking to yourself, telling yourself that's not what's happened. But when we start like thinking of all these worst case scenarios, your body goes into that environment because you feel like that's what's happened. So you're going to start feeling into like, oh my God, this is what's happened. My child, da, da, da. It's reminding yourself that's not what's happened and bringing yourself back to reality. And people will say, Lalita, that's really hard to do. Like, I can't do that right away. And it's like the more you do it, the more practice you have with it, the better it gets.
Yeah, because you have experienced high functioning anxiety yourself and have written about it in the book, you are better equipped to teach people the signs and help people get out of it.
Yeah, I feel like everyone will go through their own version of high functioning anxiety. And the way that they come out of it will be very different depending on like their own experiences and where they're at in life. And I feel like because I've been through it and I get it, I get people and I can see where they're at. So for me, it's like when someone's going through high functioning anxiety and they're catastrophizing and they're ruminating and they're thinking of all these different scenarios, they're feeling quite isolated, they're burnt out, they're not looking after themselves. I'm like, I get this. I get it because I've been there. And when you've been in a situation like that, a situation where you feel like, I don't really know if I want to be around anymore. I feel like life is really hard and I feel people don't understand me. And you're questioning whether your existence in life is like worthwhile. That's big. That's really, really big. So when I speak to people,
what advice would you give to people feeling that way?
I would say look for the hope. Look for the hope. Look for the small moments. Whatever they were doing to remind me of what life was about. I feel like those are the big, big moments in life that you sometimes can forget about because you're so focused on what's the point? What's the point? But there is a point. There's a point of you being here in this world. There's a point of you shining your light. And each of us have a very different light to shine in the world, depending on what we've been through. And your light will help someone along the way to realize why they need to shine their light.
Can anxiety become an addiction?
I think it depends on like what the addiction is about. So a lot of the times where I speak to people and they talk about anxiety, people will often feel like they become a victim and they get stuck in being this victim. And there's something that fulfills them being a victim. So if they feel like, oh, people see them in a certain way, that's where they'll end up staying. And it's like, I need to become a victim in people's lives and people will rescue me. But deeper down, there's an inner child within them that wants to be rescued, that wants to be loved, that wants to be cared for. And we all have inner children within us. And it's for us to understand, what does that inner child need? And if we're not understanding and we're not working on that inner child, it can come out in subconscious ways that we're not even aware of. So where we feel like we want to connect with people who love us all the time, but then what about ourselves and how do we then connect with other people? Because if we're always wanting love from others, how do we love others as well? So we need to be mindful of that.
What are the psychological and physical effects of anxiety?
This is huge. So when we think of like the physical effects of anxiety, often people will say to me like, I've got tummy ache all the time. I've got a headache. My throat like feels like it's like really caught up. It's really tight. I feel really sweaty palms. I might feel like I have memory fog. I might feel like my legs are feeling really wobbly. Everyone's anxiety is very different. And this is where I say, where is it that you show up with anxiety and how does that show up? But also understanding what does your anxiety look like and not comparing yourself to someone else.
Yeah.
So someone else might say, oh, my anxiety, it comes up in my chest and I feel like it's really heavy here. Well, your anxiety might come up in your stomach area. It might come up in your throat. It might come up in your head. It might come up like in the way that you're reacting to things. So don't get caught up in what you feel other people expect of what anxiety is. And start to understand more of like what anxiety actually means to you and how does it show up for you rather than getting lost in everyone else.
And what about the psychological effects anxiety can have?
This is huge. So when we think of psychological effects, people pleasing, perfectionism, and when we think of like people pleasing, I might be like, Abby, oh, you've looked at me in a certain way. I need to be like this. I need to be more like this. I need to be more like this. And I'm not telling you this, I'm creating a scenario in my head. So when we think of psychological, I'm thinking you want me to be a certain way and I need to keep performing to be this certain way in order to be fulfilled so you like me. So if you like me, I can breathe and that means that I'm good enough.
I've had a lot of people on there and it was like, I'm not enough. Like I want to be liked. Like that's never crossed my mind. But so many other things do.
So what are the things that cross your mind compared to like people filling your cup to tell you that you're enough?
My big one is health anxiety.
Like what do you focus on?
Like everyone's going to die.
But when we think of health anxiety, we often tend to focus on, I can't control these certain things.
Yeah.
So I'm now worried.
So it's control.
I've seen a rash on my hand.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, a rash could lead to me having cancer. It could be leading to everyone like disconnected from me because I'm gonna die. So now I'm thinking of the worst case scenario just because of a little bit of rash that I might have. Now that might not be
anything.
Death.
Yeah.
But I'm now manifesting that into death because I'm worried about being out of control. But health anxiety, it goes so much deeper into not having control over life in the way that we want it to. But health anxiety can also be like that we're worried about death. Like what's going to happen when we die? And I feel like, do we talk enough about death? Do we talk enough about like life after we're here? Like we're all living, we're all experiencing life. But when we start talking about death, it's like, no, don't talk about that. That's negative.
Yeah.
But do we need to talk more about death and have conversations? Like I was talking to Donna Ashworth recently and she does a lot of beautiful poems around death and grief. And when we were having a conversation about like what grief is about, what death is about, it's not a bad thing. But we're taught that it's a bad thing. We're taught, society teaches us, don't talk about death. It's negative. Yeah. It's bad. And if, God forbid, someone knows that you're talking about something like that, they're not going to want to like be around you. So we're then like, oh, I need to be what I feel people want me to be rather than what's actually going on for us. Like say if I had a conversation with you right now and I was like, Abby, like, what do you feel happens after like life after death?
I'd be like, I can't even talk about that.
Why?
I don't know. I think, God, she's morbid. Maybe.
But Abby, have you ever thought about life after death?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't want to.
Why not?
Because I don't.
What happens when you think about life after death?
I try not to because it scares me.
What scares you?
I don't know.
I feel like my sister, for example, I talked to her about death and I talked to her about like things that are going up and she has a very similar sort of expression. She's from Leeds. So she's like, just close down. Like she closes down because she's like, she's not ready to talk about it. And I'm like, but death is like amongst us all. Like why do you run away from it? Why do you not want to talk about it? And I feel like there's something more. So she also struggles with like health anxiety and things that are going on.
It's
so
a terrible thing. And it's bizarre how certain people possess it and some just don't. You know, my husband is the complete opposite to me. He doesn't worry about anything. And when he does worry, he'll pace up and down the room and I'm like, there's something on his mind. But, all the things that flash through my mind, he wouldn't even think of in a million years.
But are you also catastrophizing? Like when, like, say if your son was going through something, there may be a part of you that feels like you've already thought of like 10, 20 situations of what it could be.
Yeah.
And how you now need to handle it.
Yeah.
And that can feel very overwhelming, like very exhausting as well.
We're quite an open family. I feel like I can read my kids' minds. As a mum, you know what your kid's up to, what they're doing. And we have got a very good relationship with ours. But I don't know, like, I feel like, is there any way to fix anxiety, full stop? Or should we have a certain degree of it to make us...
Do we need to fix it or do we need to embrace it? I feel like, do we need to, like, say if you're in the driver's seat of your car and your anxiety is in your passenger seat and you're listening to like what's going on. But when your anxiety takes over and it ends up in your driver's seat, that's where the issue happened. Like where you're not able to like function properly. You're not able to do the things that you want to do because anxiety is like, oh my God, we need to take a left. We need to do right. We need to do this. We need to do this. But it's very like erratic. Yeah. Rather than you being like very sort of, let's step back. Let's understand what's going on. So when you're more connected to like your anxiety and your anxiety is in your passenger seat, you're in your driver's seat. It's like almost like listening to what's my anxiety saying and what feels right for me to do now, X, Y, and Z to like get me to where I need to get to, rather than being possessed by what your anxiety wants you to do. Yeah. I think that's really big.
Can anxiety ruin our sex lives?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that it's like, I'm so stressed, I just can't, you know what?
When we're stressed out, what happens? We're not in our present moment. When we're not in our present moment, if you're trying to be there with your partner in whatever shape or form you're trying to be there, you're not going to be there because you're mindful. Your mind is somewhere else. So when you're thinking, oh, I've got this to-do list, I've got this, I need to do this, you're not going to be present with your partner. When you're not present with your partner, you're not performing in the way that you want to perform. Yeah. When you're not doing that, your partner's going to pick up on it. They're like, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Is it me? And they will start like personalizing it, thinking, I'm doing something. Like maybe I'm not being enough, or I shouldn't be showing up in the way that I am. So I really feel like we need to understand, like, how does stress impact on your life? And does stress impact on your life by you disconnecting from where you are in the present moment and you're worried about these to-do lists, I need to do this, I need to do this, or I'm not good enough for my partner. And that tends to show up in how you're showing up with your partner. Yeah. So naturally, you're not then going to be able to perform because you're worried, I'm not good enough anyway. Like, they don't like me. Look at the way that they've just looked at me, or look at the way that they've touched me in a certain way. So we're creating narratives that don't exist. Yeah. And these narratives become reality of how we're living life day to day.
That's so true.
I have a lot of clients that come into me, like they start working with me, and they're like, I'm really struggling with my sex life. Yeah. I feel like I'm not available. I feel like my partner thinks that I'm not good enough. I feel like my partner thinks that I'm not present. And when we start working and understanding what's going on underneath everything, it often comes from like they're not present. Yeah. Because when they're physical with their partner, they may find themselves thinking about like the to-do list or something else. Yeah. And they're no longer available. So they're not able to show up in the way that they would like to show up.
There must be so many people feeling that way. What advice could you give them, or any tips that they can do to break this pattern?
So often what I would say is first become aware of your pattern. Yeah. So first become aware of like, what's the pattern that's showing up? Why are you showing up in the way that you are? And then number two is like trying to understand, okay, how do I allow myself to be more present? Because if I am worried about X, Y, and Z, if I am worried about my partner being satisfied, or if I am worried about work side of things, what's going on there for me? And how does my stress then impact on me being present? Yeah. Because if I'm not able to be present, how do I communicate that to my partner as well? So they don't think
it's them.
It's them. Because it's easy for them to think, I must be doing something wrong, or I'm not attractive enough. Yeah. So it's like, how do we then communicate to the other person, this is what's going on for me right now? And it's just being accepting of like, this is where my partner's at, but I also know it's not me. And how do we like bring space together to like just really work together?
So what do you say? Just say, look, I feel too overwhelmed and too stressed. I don't feel like I'm in the moment.
And I'm
It's
trying.
kind of not
and
you.
I'm trying.
And I'm trying.
I'm trying to be in the moment because I'm feeling very overwhelmed. I'm feeling very like stressed out at the minute.
But a lot of people would find that in itself difficult to do because that's not sexy, is it?
Yeah,
It's like, do you want to have a snog? No, because I'm feeling overwhelmed.
But it's vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's vulnerability is like, how do we see being vulnerable? It's a weakness. It's bad. And especially with men, men feel like if I am vulnerable with
But I don't think, I'm not being sexist, but I don't think a man would ever say he was too stressed to have sex.
No.
If my husband said to me, oh, sorry, not tonight, I'm feeling too stressed to have sex, I would be so offended.
Why?
And I would feel rejection and almost shame. I'm feel embarrassed. But if I said it to him, no, I'm not tonight, I'm too stressed, can't have sex with you, I would expect him to just deal with that without it having any effect on him. Which is kind of double standards.
But I think this is where self-awareness is very important because we need to understand.
Is that bad?
I don't feel like it's bad. I feel like we need to have self-awareness because if we're saying something to our partner and we're saying, look, I don't really want it today, and then they're saying X, Y, and Z, we need to sit with that and we need to like really understand like where they're coming from because they may feel rejection. They may feel abandonment. And it's like, let's talk about it because
but I think
this is where I'm at.
If I was the one to say I was too stressed because I know I love that person and fancy them, I wouldn't see it being an issue.
Yeah.
But if he said it to me, I'd be like, oh my God, he doesn't fancy me anymore.
But why? Why is that? Is that trust?
It's ridiculous.
No, but it's not ridiculous. I
think most women would feel like that.
Yeah.
I genuinely
I feel it comes from like a place of rejection, abandonment, where we feel like if I'm presenting, I need to perform. I need to be the good girl. I need to make sure I'm following all the rules so my partner is happy with me. And that's what we're taught, isn't it, as women? We're often taught that to be the good girl, we have to follow the rules, make sure your partner's happy. And if they're not, you're the problem.
Sure.
And you're not the problem. But there's a part of you that then starts to feel that shame. I don't want to have sex. I don't want to do these things. But there feels like, but I'm the problem because he's not happy now. And being a highly sensitive person, you start noticing he's gone quiet or he's gone and sat downstairs for like 20 minutes and he never normally does this. Like I've done something to upset him. It's because I didn't do this. It's because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. So we create a narrative in our heads of what we think it is. But also just having a conversation can be so powerful. Just saying like, look, Pia, I feel like I said X, Y, and Z to you, but this is how I'm feeling. What's going on for you? Can I just double check to make sure that we're on the same page with this?
Yeah.
So you're just opening up a conversation.
It's communication, isn't it?
Yeah. Otherwise, you can run off with your own narrative.
Of course.
He's running off with his own narrative. And how does that help both of you? Like it doesn't.
No. How does HFA differ from other anxiety disorders and how can it manifest itself in our lives?
HFA is different because when we think of anxiety, we're diagnosed with it. You go to the GP and you're like, these are all my symptoms. The GP will diagnose you with anxiety disorder. With HFA, you're often not diagnosed because it's a way that you've learned to be in the world. It's a way that you've learned to cope, to feel safe, to feel secure. So you've learned to be the overgiver, the overcompensator, the one that's there for everyone else, the one that's available, the one that's making sure that everything's all okay for everyone. You're the one who's like making sure that socially everyone's okay. Always, always, always about everyone else. So when we think of anxiety, it stops you like functioning in day to day. High functioning anxiety doesn't stop you. It pushes you, if anything, it pushes you to do more and more and more of how you want to live life. It doesn't debilitate you.
So in what ways does high functioning anxiety present itself?
So when we look at like people pleasing, people that are very good at people pleasing, I've learned to look at you and I'm like, oh, you looked at me in a certain way. I now need to do the X, Y, and Z to make sure that you like me. So I'm always looking for others to fill my cup. Perfectionism, like when we're looking at being perfect, again, I'm worried about how are you going to judge me? You're going to judge me in X, Y, and Z. So I need to keep presenting as being X, Y, and Z so you don't judge me in a certain way because otherwise I'm worried.
But it's all anxiety based on how other people perceive us. Can't it be how you perceive yourself, or if you just want to do something right or hit a target at work?
I think
why
it's
does it always
all-
come back to what other people think?
I feel like anxiety can take us into completely different spaces. So yeah, we may think that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, but when we look at it and we break it down and I sit with people, I'm like, well, where does this come from? What's going on here? And often it does come back down to how they worry about other people are going to judge them or how they judge themselves. And often it comes from a lack of self-love, self-compassion, self-worth. So if you have grown up believing that you are not good enough, you will then continue to look at other people to try and fill your cup. Can you fill my cup? And it's temporary until you meet the next person. Can you fill my cup? It's temporary. So you can end up in relationships where it becomes more about the other person than about you because you're so focused on like making it better for everyone else. What about you in all of that? Like you forget about that. That's why I feel like with high functioning anxiety, you're so focused on everyone else. And it's like, hello, what about you? And I will say to people, it's a bit like, have you watched Star Wars?
No.
So Star Wars, a bit like, you know when, you probably know who Yoda is. Yoda's
I know,
the green
I
guy.
love Yoda, baby Yoda.
Yoda's like the green guy and he will speak to the Jedis and he's like, to become a Jedi master, you have to go through experiences. And they're like getting frustrated, like, I want to become a Jedi master. I want to become a Jedi master. And Yoda's just like chilling and like, well, to become that, you need to wait and you need to be patient. And they realize through their wars and through the things that they go through, this is what it takes to become a Jedi master. And I feel like in life, we are going through things and we want to just get to the next stage.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to wait and we have to really sit in what's going on for us to get to the place that we really need to understand. I get why I had to go through that to get to that place. And I feel like that's really important.
There's more to the list of ways high functioning anxiety can manifest itself. The excessive worrier, the perfectionist, burnout, being over-responsible, inadequacy and self-doubt, procrastination and loneliness.
Yeah, they're huge parts of how we show up being high functioning anxiety. And if we're showing up constantly like we're disconnected from ourselves, we're feeling lonely, we're feeling isolated. If I'm feeling like I need to keep just taking on everything you want me to do, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. I'm now becoming the yes person. I don't know what boundaries I need for myself. I'm feeling burnout. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling exhausted. No one really sees me. So I'm feeling very disconnected, very isolated, very lonely. So when we're then feeling like self-doubt comes in, when you're worrying like, okay, I should be doing this, but this person wants me to do this and this and this and this, you have that imposter syndrome. And like the imposter's sitting on your shoulder and it's like, you're not doing this. You took a right. Why did you take a right? You should have taken a left. You should have done this. You should have done that. And you're like, you're just feeling very overwhelmed. And it's like, how do you manage all these different parts of you to move forward, not letting these things keep consuming you and allowing you to end up in that high functioning anxiety state? You need to just stop and start listening and start understanding, how does high functioning anxiety actually show up in your life?
Yeah. What if people don't know that they're in this state and they're so used to feeling this way?
A lot of people do, Abby. So many people like come to me, they're like, I thought this was normal.
Yeah.
And they'll say to me like, I thought I was the only one that deals with this. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, there's a way of like being high functioning intentional, not high functioning anxiety. High functioning anxiety is when you're scattered.
Yeah.
High functioning intentional is when yes, you can be high functioning, but you're more intentional in the way that you're going, rather than being like,
basically you're in control of it.
Yeah. Rather than being like a headless chicken and just doing anything and everything because you're feeling very scattered. It's like learning to understand what you need and giving yourself what you need.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about these 5 steps to calming your inner anxiety. So step 1, discover your patterns and unveil your hidden self. What do you mean by that?
So what does that mean? That means it's like we're finally realizing and looking at what is actually going on in my life. Like, why are these patterns showing up in the way that they do? So if you're a people pleaser, if you're a perfectionist, you start noticing, how am I a perfectionist? How am I a people pleaser? Like what is coming up? Do I feel like I worry when people are disappointed or when they look like they're upset with me. How do I sit with that? So you're learning what your triggers are. You're just starting to stop, pause, and understand what your triggers are.
Number 2, decoding your patterns, uncovering your beliefs and facing your shadow.
So this is where you go deeper.
Okay.
So you're going deeper by understanding, well, why do I feel like this? If I feel like I'm a people pleaser with certain people, if I feel like I need to be a perfectionist with certain people, why? Where does that come from? So you're going deeper into your earlier patterns, and often it does stem from our early childhood. Where does it come from? Why do we feel the need to be a perfectionist, be a people pleaser?
Yeah.
And if we're not these things, how does that make us feel? And if we're struggling with that, I think it's really important to start looking and understanding more about that.
3, develop self-connection and transcend your fear, learning to regulate fear.
So this is where we start to actually understand, what's the fear? What is the biggest fear that I have? So the biggest fear is, I don't want to disappoint people.
Yeah.
I don't want to let people down. I don't want people to think badly about me. So why do we have this fear? Where does that come from? So this is where we face our shadow and we start understanding, I might have felt like growing up, I felt a burden taking up space. I felt a burden being someone who had a voice. So you learn, don't take up space, don't be too much, don't be X, Y, and Z, because no one's going to accept you as you are. So you learn growing up as a woman, as a man, that I can't be X, Y, and Z because no one's going to accept me as that. I have to be this. So you feel like you have to fit in to be that version of you. That's not who you want to be. So when you start understanding what your fear is, you start making sense of, that's why I show up in this way.
Yeah.
So you're like really facing yourself and your patterns and making sense of why you do what you do.
Embrace your sensitivity and reclaim your self-trust.
So when we think of like self-trust, I think it's so powerful because it's about how do we show up for ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we see other people? And often it's our intuition and we connect from something like so deeper. So I might be sat here in front of you and I'm like, she's looking at me in a certain way. I have to people please, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And I'm become scattered in like what I think I need to be. But when I feel like I'm so grounded in who I am, I feel like I'm enough in who I am. When I'm presenting with you, I'm not worried about all of these things like self-trust and like, what does this person think of me? Because I know I'm enough as I am.
Yeah.
And that's really important. So for me, step 4 is about really honoring your self-trust and listening into what is your self-trust saying to you.
That's a hard thing to do as well, though, isn't it?
I feel like we're not encouraged enough in life to focus on what your intuition is saying.
Yeah.
I feel like we're focused on more on like, what does the world want from us rather than what's important for us.
Yeah, agreed. And number 5, unleash self-compassion. And 12 powers on how to do this is in your book. Can you give us 3 examples?
Unleash your self-compassion. How many of us are sitting in life? And I was sitting with I went to my author party last night and I was sitting with a few people and they were like, I don't know how to love myself. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to love yourself? And every single situation I saw them in, they were like, oh, sorry. And I'm like, please do not say sorry to me again. I'm sick and tired of you saying sorry. But for me, it's like, what's going on there? Like, what's happening when you're constantly saying sorry?
Yeah.
Because are you worried about how the other person's thinking? And then we were talking and I was going deeper with them and we were discussing more about, one of them was like, I feel like I'm an imposter within myself. I feel like I'm always here, but I feel like people don't see me. People don't understand me. I feel like people don't get me. So I just end up trying to fit in and give people what they want rather than just be myself. And I was like, I want you here tonight just to be yourself. I don't want any more of you trying to fit in because it is about you being who you are. But I feel like we live in a world where often people don't understand or accept that you are your own person and people need you to be a certain way. But this is where loneliness can creep in, burnout can creep in, you feeling like, oh, I need to be a certain way because people don't get me. So let me be X, Y, and Z and fit in. But then you're not being yourself. And what does that actually mean? And why do we fear so much about being ourselves? And often it comes from, we don't give ourselves enough self-compassion. We're so busy.
Because you would never speak to others how like you look in the mirror, oh, I look ugly, oh, I look fat, oh, the state of this. You'd never say that to anybody else.
No.
Because you would deeply hurt the feelings. So, you know, as a nation, we need to be kinder to ourselves.
I
More
feel like
self-love.
that's so important. And I feel like that's a deep root of a lot of the issues that we present with is we don't know how to love ourselves.
Yeah.
And people will say, oh, I don't want to love myself. And it's like, but that's a big part of like, how do we show up? And loving ourselves often comes from a version of us in a child that we have learned is too much, is a burden. No one loves her. No one loves him. Let's lock them away. So we learn to lock that part of ourselves away and present how we feel we should be. But that part of us is always screaming out like, hello, I need to be seen. I'm here. And you don't know how to handle that part of you. But that's where the inner work comes in. So when you start working on your inner self and you start making sense of like the things that you've been through, you realize, actually, my 9-year-old self feels X, Y, and Z because I've locked her away, because she went through something and no one knew how to love her. So I didn't know how to handle that situation. So I've locked her away. But I need to bring her back out to really make sense and to bring in that self-love again so I can move forward without disconnecting from myself. So it's so powerful.
I think this chat's predominantly been about adults. And, you know, you talk about working on your inner 9-year-old or your inner 10-year-old. But what about these 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds? Can they feel anxiety and high functioning anxiety, you know, with the pressures of social media? You know, how can we kind of nip it in the bud now for our children?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you've made. And I feel like there's people that I've been speaking to, friends, family, clients, where they will present and they will say, look, this is what my child's going through. I don't know what to do. And when we like break down, they've learned to become the good girl, the good boy.
Yeah.
And they've taken on this role of, okay, mom and dad are too busy for me. And mom and dad have got a lot going on. I now need to present as being this good person. If I'm this good person, it doesn't mean that anyone else is going to be impacted. So they become a version of themselves that isn't
sad.
really, it's sad. It's really sad. It's really sad. And this is the thing, because even within ourselves, like I know me being in a child once upon a time, I learned my parents are too busy. And I learned that I have to be a certain way and not be a burden, not get in the way of anything else. And I feel
what would happen if you did? You get told off?
It wasn't even getting told off. It was like they didn't have time. They were so busy. So I learned, don't get in the way of other people because they're busy. And my narrative of life became, if you're getting in the way, you're causing a problem. And that's not how other people saw it, but that's the narrative I created. And I feel like a lot of kids, even now, like they will come up with a narrative of mom and dad are busy. They're busy with work. They're busy with life. They're busy with like their friends. I can't get to them. So I feel like even just having a check-in with your kids like once a week and just saying like, right, this is our weekly check-in. We're going to have hot chocolate. We're going to like chill out. And this is our time just to check in can make a big difference, because they feel safe talking to you. They feel like there's availability for them to talk to you, and they don't feel like there's no space for them. They feel like I can come and this is my space to talk about things. And then as a parent, how do you manage it? Because if a child's coming to you and saying, Mom, Dad, I feel like you're really busy all the time. And if you're saying, oh my God, what do you mean we're busy? We're not busy. We're always working for you. We're doing this. That shuts them down.
Yeah.
They're not feeling seen. They're not feeling heard. How do you really listen to them and attune to like what their narrative of life is? And their narrative might not be like realistic, but how do you then tune them into like where your version is coming from? So you're listening to what they're saying.
Make them feel safe.
Yeah.
And
That's
stop
an important
that damage early on.
Really big part of that is how do you tune into them feeling safe, to them feeling like mom and dad, I can come to them like with anything, and they listen, they understand, they get it. That's big.
How would high functioning anxiety present in children, other than, you know, my parents are busy, I'm going to keep out the way? Any other signs and symptoms?
So a lot of parents will say that my child is really, really good at school. As soon as they come home, that's it. They will present in a very different way, and school are very surprised they're presenting in this way. So when I say that they present in this way, they might be having like a meltdown. They might be really struggling to manage their emotions. So they've kept it all together at school. They've come home and they're feeling like exhausted. They don't know how to handle that. So it comes out in like just pushing boundaries and like making, like pushing everything that you can think of. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And you're like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
You might go to school and speak to school, and school are like, but they're like exceptional here. Like, I don't understand what's going on. But we have to realize that, are they masking? Are they masking all day at school? And when they come home, it's like that's their safe space, and they feel like they can push boundaries. We also need to realize that they might present as being the good person, the good version of them. So at school, they're the good version. They come home, they're the good version. But underneath that, that's not what's going on. They have learned to, I need to be good because mom and dad are busy, and they're struggling with my little brother, or they're struggling with my little sister. So I now need to present I'm good enough. But they may not be good enough. There may be like other things going on for them, but they just feel like, I can't trust that there's enough space for me as well in all of this. I feel like that's huge.
I've absolutely loved this chat. You know, anxiety is something that so many of my listeners have, you know, been in touch. Can we do a pod about anxiety? We need help. We need to know what steps to take. So I just want to thank you first and foremost for coming on. And before you go, one last question for anyone out there struggling to move forward and take those first steps in tackling their anxiety. What would you say to them?
I would say, look at your triggers. Start by looking at your triggers. And I say this to all my clients, is start noticing day to day what are the things that really trigger you. And trigger might be that I'm talking to you and you might pick up your phone and I'm like, oh, I think I'm boring. I think I'm this. I'm creating a narrative of like how or what is going on. So based on that, that's my trigger. My trigger is you're picking up your phone. You're not now interested in what I'm saying. And now I'm creating a narrative. So that becomes my trigger. What are the triggers that are going through? Like, am I going through in life? And then you're starting to understand them. Go deeper into them. Start journaling into them. So making sense of, why do I feel this way in certain situations, and what does that really mean? So when you start understanding that, it means that you can go deeper and deeper into like your patterns. And start making sense of your beliefs. Because we want to make sense of, do you feel like I'm a boring person? Do you feel like people don't really like what I've got to say? Do you like, what are these beliefs that you're living life by? I think it's really important to look at them.
Yeah. And I definitely think after our chat today, I think I definitely do need to address some of the anxiety that's going on within me and, you know, learn to control it, to be honest.
I feel like it's not even controlling. I think it's managing. Like, I feel like, I don't know if you watch Inside Out 2.
Oh, yeah.
But when you watch Inside Out 2 and you see anxiety, and anxiety is like, oh, I need to like manage all these things. But actually, it's like all your emotions working together.
Yeah.
And when you learn not to bottle away your emotions and learn to, how do you work together with things, life changes like dramatically. I think it's just understanding that it's okay to allow all my other emotions to come out.
Yeah.
And learning to sit in them emotions.
Well, thank you. I'm going to come and see you again.